Welcome to Threads of Sustainability, where you get to hear the passionate, informative, and engaging conversations of creatives, makers, manufacturers, and producers from all over the globe. We explore what sustainability can look like in the quilting, fiber, and textile world, and I'm your host, Bridget O'Flaherty, also known as the Sustainable Quilter. Welcome to this week's episode of Threads of Sustainability. I'm your host, Bridget O'Flaherty. And this week, we've got something a little bit different. I've got a gentleman by the name of Graham Stewart, and he is an international textile and apparel production fiber to brand specialist. And he works with world-class organizations. For the past 2 years, he's been working a little bit more in sort of in a lab setting almost. He's developed and patented a more sustainable process for bleaching and dyeing cotton, which is super exciting to hear that this kind of work is being done out there in the world. He has come up with a process called Fibre 52, and it's environmentally kind and cost-conscious processing for cotton with a global application. It's an inexpensive replacement for traditional and outdated cotton preparation methods, which are used to produce prepared for dye and dyed fabrics. So it's a pretty exciting innovation that they've come up with that he's been working on. And it uses natural products instead of heavy chemicals, and it's done at lower temperatures, so it requires less energy, less water, and less processing time overall. So he's working with some really great brands out there, and he's working with some really great people who are helping him with developing these innovations and putting together some amazing results. So it was a really interesting conversation. He's been in the industry a long time as a dyer, and he's a master dyer, and really has such an insight into that whole world. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the conversation. I sure did. Hi, Graham. Welcome to the show. I'm really excited to talk with you. I have Graham Stewart here with me, and he's from Fibre 52. You're down in South Carolina, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Tell me about where you are in South Carolina, because it's probably a lot warmer than where I am right now.
I'm sure it is, actually. I'm across the bridge from Charleston, South Carolina, which is the most beautiful city in America.
Nice.
It's a fabulous city, a lot of history. And where I live is in Mount Pleasant, one of the oldest parts of America.
Okay.
It's where the British landed, the British invasion. There's a plaque a few hundred yards from me here that says the British invasion.
Oh my goodness. That must feel a little bit weird. I mean, you're British, and so that must be a bit weird to read that.
Yeah, I mean, it was a little before my time.
Yeah, it was true. Fair.
Yeah, so they're very, very nice part of the world, I have to say. I'm very lucky to be here.
Awesome.
Also, big part of the textile industry, what's left of it in the USA, still exists here in South and North Carolina. Of course, the cotton's grown here too, which is something we can talk about.
Yeah, I want to talk about the cotton for sure, because Fibre 52 is really focusing on cotton, right? Like, tell me a little bit about Fibre 52. I want to go back at some point and talk about some of your early years, but tell me about Fibre 52 and what that project is for you.
Okay, I noticed as a dyer, what I was doing is I had my own brand, a wool brand called Duckworth. I started that 10 years ago with a rancher from Montana. He had 13,000 Rambouillet sheep. And, the Rambouillets are the French version or American version now of what were merino breeds, which the merino breeds were mainly in Spain, but then they're in France, and they never got as far as England, really. They were mainly into crossbreds in the UK, but beautiful wool. I had to form my own supply chain. And the brand went real well. I mean, no doubt, and it's thriving today. But what happened is I was stood around in dye houses because here in America there was no circular knitted wool, not 1 inch of it. I didn't know that till I got here.
So describe to me what that means.
So if you look at what I'm wearing here, this stretchy, this is a circular knit.
Okay.
And so circular knits are usually quite large machines with gauges, different gauges. So you can go from like 12 gauge, which is quite coarse, like the sweater you're wearing right now.
Yeah.
That's a flat knit, but that's like an 8 gauge or something.
Okay.
But then it goes through to what I'm wearing today, which is 28 gauge. There are finer, but 28 is really the sweet spot for circular knits.
Okay.
And what I was doing is producing mainly base layers to begin with, but then mid layers and outer layers. But
Okay.
The initial work I did was dyeing these is really difficult, right? Because the wool's unstable,
Okay.
and the knits are not stable. And so to dye them in fabric form is really difficult. And what happened, I got to a point where I was processing, like £10,000 a week. So it got substantial, probably £10,000 every 2 weeks. But I was always stood around in the dye house waiting for a machine. I was waiting for a drying machine or the machine that actually stabilized the called a compactor. And so even though I dyed the stuff, I had to wait around so I could finish it.
Right.
And you can't leave wool wet. You shouldn't leave any natural fibers wet. So
right.
While I was hanging around, one day the owner said to me, look, we don't really have a qualified dyer. Can you take a look at some of our recipes? And mainly they were dyeing cotton. And, I dyed a lot of cotton when I was younger. Even though Huddersfield, my town, is a wool town, and I'll talk about that. We were a big dyeing company. We had 10 dye houses, and we did quite a lot of cotton.
So this is back in the UK earlier days.
Back in the UK in the 70s, would you believe? So I started as a dyer when I was 15 in 1972.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And then I was dyeing a lot of wool as well, and my degree's in dyeing. So my degree's in coloration, or textile coloration, through the Society of Dyers and Colorists in Bradford, Yorkshire, England.
Okay.
And I started looking at these recipes, and I realized they were about the same as they were 60 years ago. They hadn't changed a great deal.
Oh, okay.
And they were getting quite a few wrong. So I noticed they're in the dye baths for 8 to 12 hours. Now, the problem is with dyeing cotton is that traditionally cotton's dyed with what's called caustic soda. I'm sure you use it, or you know of it. And caustic's pretty unfriendly, especially if you get it on yourself. But also it's very unfriendly to cotton in that it starts to degrade the cellulose, because in cotton you have a situation where there are nodes, little vegetable nodes inside cotton, right? And which is affectionately called trash. So you have to get the trash out of the cotton. And caustic soda is brilliant at that. And it saponifies the waxes in the cotton and so on, so you can dye it and this, that, and the other.
Okay.
But getting the nodes out, getting the trash out is really what caustic soda does. But caustic soda is teamed up with hydrogen peroxide, which we all know is good stuff because you can kind of gargle with it, clean your teeth with it, whatever.
Sure.
So it's not doing you any harm. But in coupling up that with the hydrogen peroxide, the cellulose in cotton is being damaged from the first minute.
Okay.
Then you're rising the temperature. So in traditional cotton dyeing, cotton bleaching, let me just stay with the bleaching.
Okay.
And getting rid of those nodes. In traditional bleaching, you take the temperature up to near the boil. So you're up at 200. I'm not thinking metric anymore, being in America.
That's okay.
So it goes up to about 200, a bit more than 200 degrees. And my patents, I've got 3 patents for Fibre 52. And in all of them, I described that we cannot go above 150 degrees. So,
keeping the temperature lower.
Yeah, so we usually save about 58 degrees actually on average, which is a lot of energy. So, when we start talking about sustainability, this is where we begin, in that we start to save energy. We don't do the damage. We don't have the carbon footprint that we would normally have.
Yeah.
And this is all done. So what I started doing was a lot of trial and error, a lot of error, I've got to say, in that I had a dye machine that was pretty much dedicated to me. It was a £100 dye machine, which is reasonably small in, in commercial dyeing. And while I was hanging around, I started buying my own cotton and started dyeing it, and really thought, there's got to be a better way. And I started getting bioproducts and replacing the caustic soda. And that was really to get the heavy alkali that's doing the damage out of dyeing altogether, out of bleach altogether. And that whole process took me about 18 months before I had a eureka moment where I found a bioproduct that catalyzed everything. So instead of just having lower temperatures, I found that I could do everything much quicker. So doing less damage, but again, less time means
less energy.
Less energy and so on. So the energy saving just started to build and build. And then I was fortunate enough to meet some great guys from Houston, Texas, who are in the energy space. They're a technology company called Energy Yoga. They sell consumer electricity. The CEO, the owner, is a biochemist. And he got real interested in this. And so we teamed up. And so then things really started to speed up because, I had a partner who had some financial depth. And, they were very encouraging as well. And they've helped me a ton. And we've put quite a few staff together now. So
that's awesome.
We've been together for about year and a half. And
the quick elevator pitch of what Fibre 52 does. Tell me that.
Right. There isn't a quick one, unfortunately.
Of course not.
What it does is it saves energy. It saves water. We haven't gotten to that yet. So we save a lot of water. We save time. And we don't use heavy chemicals. And from that bleach bath, usually what happens is you wash off and soap off. So I don't like soap either, and so we don't use any soap. And so again, you're not putting soap down the drain. You're not, causing other environmental problems. And so I can go straight from the bleach bath into dyeing without dropping the bath. So that saves 10,000 liters of water. For every 1,000 kilograms of fiber. Whatever state that fiber may be in, whether it's a yarn or a knit or even loose fiber, it saves that amount of water. Then you go straight into the dyeing, and the dyeing is what I concentrate on is what we call reactive dyes, and I'm sure you and your listeners use those. They're called dyeing reactives, so they're very reactive with high tinctorial power, which again is very sustainable, because what you don't want is dye stuff that don't have high tinctorial power, because you get a lot of wastage, and you're trying to you
want it to stay in the fiber. You don't want it to be going in the water.
Not down the drain, exactly. I mean, we used to when I was a kid, and we can come onto the big dye stuff company behind my house. We used to bet on what color the river would be that day.
Oh, wow, really?
That's how bad it was back in the late. That was late 60s, early 70s, and I mean, things are a lot different these days.
I sure hope so.
We're not perfect, but we're getting there slowly but surely. So that's the elevator pitch, if you can call it that.
Why Fibre 52? What's the 52?
That's the chromosomes or the chromophores added together in cotton. It just means cotton, because you add those together and they come to 52. And we were trying to come up with something original and something people would ask questions about. And thank you for that. So you have asked the question, why 52? And it's a good question, and it's difficult to explain, but it is cotton.
So tell me a bit about that dye process. Then you work with the reactive dyes, and is that able to reduce the amount of water that's also being used in that?
Yeah, the reactive dyes are quick, but again, still maximum in reactive dyeing. The maximum is 140 degrees, but then most cold reactives don't need that to go above that temperature. Where we got an issue was with direct dyes, and I don't know if you've used
Yeah,
directs
I
much.
mostly use natural dyes myself. So yeah, I'm
All
gonna
right,
yeah.
all right, right. I'll come on to natural
Okay,
dyes in a
okay.
minute too. But what happens with direct dyes? They've been around a
Yeah.
long time. Uh, Probably, I don't know, maybe 80, 90 years now. And with directs, you have to take them to the boil
Okay.
because they don't have that reactivity that the reactive dyes are named after. They go on in a different way, which is a long story. But basically, they're much more difficult to build
Okay.
up, much longer temperatures, longer dwell times, and so. Fairly quickly, I went to Italy with this process because I used to live
Okay.
in Italy, but I work for Italian companies and I've still got very close friends there who are still in the textile industry in Prato, Italy. And so we started dyeing sweaters, would you believe? We were dyeing sweaters in a beautiful dye house there. And the owner said, look, it's all right dyeing with reactives, but we use more direct dyes because they're cheaper. And I said, oh, so that's fine. You can dye direct, but don't take them above 140 or 150 max. And he said, you can't do that with direct. And I said, well, try, and it worked
Okay.
great. We're not 100% sure yet. We're getting there because we have a very friendly professor in that town who's working with us with his fantastic labs, one of the best labs in the
Okay.
world, owned by him and one of the world's largest luxury groups. But they've got this lab which we're able to go from the dye house to the lab and test just about everything. And we all became interested as to why are we getting better fastnesses with lower temperatures, shorter dwell times, and so on. So that's a nice to
Yeah.
have, and it's always nice to try and figure those things out. And so that's one of my tasks now. It doesn't really matter, but I'm enjoying
That's
doing
good.
it.
Well, it does
But
matter. It does matter. These things, they're 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 kind of stepping stones, and you're figuring out what's coming next, and you're changing the way things are being done. And what I find awesome about this is you're changing things at the processing level. I'm a person who's like I'm a hobbyist almost compared to what you were doing. I just make my art and I do the occasional natural dyes, and I would love your opinion about the natural dyes, but I'm just doing that in my studio, my home little studio, and I do individual batches. I'm not doing mass runs of anything. I'm doing small stuff. And I know that natural dyes, there's always the conversation that a lot of people are thinking, well, I'm going to move to natural dyes because they're so much better for the environment. And they're not necessarily. Everything's chemicals. Everything requires chemicals in order to have bonding. And I understand all of that. But maybe you can talk a little bit more about these different kinds of dyes. So you've talked about direct dyes, reactive dyes, and we've got natural dyes. Can you talk a little bit about all those differences?
yeah, I'll stay on cellulose,
Yeah.
and then we'll go to other. Yeah, with cellulose, in
Yeah.
jeanswear, for instance, or chinos, in jeanswear, you're
Yeah.
using indigo, yeah, which has been around forever. They're called, and also what are called sulfur
Yeah.
dyes. Um, they're all in a group called
Okay.
insolubles. Uh, they have to be put into a Luco state. So we trick those dye stuffs into thinking they're not into thinking they're
Okay.
insoluble. Uh, so then they go into the fiber, and then you oxidize the fiber, and voila,
They
you've
stay there.
got the dye. Oh, yeah, they
Okay.
stay there, and they're very good at staying
Yeah.
there, by the way. And so I have a patent on that as well. And the problem is, it depends how many hours you got in the day. I'm sticking to reactives and directs right now because I just don't have time to get into that monster business of what is, as we call them, bottom weights for chinos and the and
And
indigo, because indigo, I love
and so
indigo, but
that's a
again,
natural indigo, not a synthetic indigo.
well, you can use both.
Okay.
I mean, in industry, you've got something which is called a pre-reduced
Okay.
indigo, so they've already tricked it into thinking it's
Okay.
not insoluble, and yeah, so those dye stuffs are a big range. And again, I grew up in my town with and that's where I got my job, actually, with the sulfur dye works, was that's where they're all invented in
Okay.
Huddersfield. The problem is the smell of bad eggs. You grow up with it because
Nobody
that's
likes that.
that's the way yeah, it's beautiful. But that's the way they're made. And so I kind of grew up with one of with that beautiful odor around, and that that's just part of being a dye stuff town. But there's still a decent sized group of dyes. But then if you come on to my past in wool, wool's a terribly complex fibre in compared to any other, pretty much. And we don't know that much about it. And I've spent my life trying to figure it out. And so wool traditionally is dyed with what we call acid dyes.
Okay.
Because wool likes acid. It's a protein fiber like our hair. But the problem with wool is if it gets into alkali, like you would dye cotton, it degrades wool pretty quick. So you try and keep wool at a normal pH, which is around 6.57. Or if you're dyeing, you can bring it down to 4.5, and it won't do wool any damage. It quite likes. And so that's why acid dyes were made. And they've been around over 100 years. And I used a lot of them in the past and still do a bit. And then the interesting advent was what are called chrome dyes. And this is where we get into mordants, and you'll be familiar with mordants. So chromes were the first mass-used mordant dyes. And I used a lot of them when I was younger. They started to get banned. The government said, wait a minute, you're putting this stuff down the drains, it's not happening. And so the dye stuff companies invented what are called pre-metallized dyes. So the metal was already inside the dye, and that was all sorts of different metals. Again, back to mordants. The mordant in this case is actually inside the dye stuff because they're pre-metallized. And so that took wool into another realm because they were much faster. When I say faster, they didn't wash out as easily. They stood up to perspiration better. The light fastness was in many cases even better than the acid dyes, which don't have bad light fastness. And then, the pre-mets, they're still going. And today, pretty much that's what happens in wool dyeing. You're using something like a pre-metallized or an acid dye. They're still around,
And in terms of the environmental impacts on those from those different dye stuffs, like when you're dealing with that, I know about the reactive dyes are quite stable once they're done, right? Like they're stable then. And so can you talk a little bit about that? Like if somebody as a home sewer is wanting to make some choices around playing around with dyeing, so this isn't a commercial application, how do they decide which dye to go with? There's a bunch of different options. There's Procyon dyes, and how do they decide?
Well, Procyons are
They're
they were the
reactives,
first reactors invented in Huddersfield in 1956. And so they're a big group. They're the biggest group, probably the biggest dyes in the world. If you go out and buy RIT, R-I-T dye, from Walmart or wherever, those clever guys will have mixed up some different dyes together. So you'll get some, equivalent of a Procyon in there. But you might have other things in, because what they're trying to do is, again, they mimic a class of dye stuffs that we used to call union dyes, and quite often we'd make them ourselves. And what we would do, we'd mix all these dye stuffs together, roll them down the dye stuff, the dye factory yard, and put them in the dye machine, and you could dye just about anything with them. Because something would happen, and that's what happens. That's what happens with the dice. And I buy them myself. I'm guilty, but I'm a bit like you. We tend to eat beetroot every week, and when you boil the beetroot, you've got that beautiful red liquor left in, which is gorgeous. And I love to play around with that, adding like sodium bicarbonate or baking soda and things like that, and it turns it blue, and you get different colors by using, again, things that are natural. And so I quite enjoy that. And I think that if you can use natural dyes, and again, being someone who loves vegetables, beetroot being one of my favorites, but I also love dandelion leaves, and I eat dandelion at least 3 times a
Okay.
week. And then, yeah, I love green stuff. So if there is any green liquor left when after, and these days we steam more than
Sure.
boil, but I like to boil if I'm going to dye the
Yeah.
next day. And so
Some dye. Yeah.
personally, what I try and do is just use common salt, or I'll use some sodium bicarbonate, baking
Yeah.
soda, whatever's around, and just mess around and see what I can do. And usually you can get some decent results. And it's also nice to mix beetroot with the green
Yeah.
and so on. And because some of those natural dyes are pretty expensive.
Yeah, they can be.
But I think that, I see it happening. I know quite a few people now who are really looking to make the jump into commerciality by having natural dyestuffs in commercial availability, which I can't wait for. So, I would love to help anybody or work with anybody who thinks I could
Yeah.
help. I'm kind of guessing I can, but those dyestuffs, yeah. Right now, I think a question you were leading to is, are natural dyes as nice as we really think they are? I think one issue is their tinctorial power is not brilliant. Not like a reactive, which you'll react 90%, right? So that's 90% of the dye stuff going into the fiber. As you know, with a natural dye stuff, you might be lucky to get 30-40% in. And therefore, the mordants that we put in there help a lot, but those mordants are often metallic, like alums and so on, and therefore they're not good for the environment. So you've got to be just careful with them. That's all. I'm not saying people.
No, it's just the disposal needs to be thought of, and you can't just pour it down the drain or throw it on your garden necessarily, because those metals that are in there, which is that what the alum is, a metal, right? And it's a compound that is it a compound? It is a compound.
It's a compound.
Yeah. That's toxic, and it is not. It has to be taken care of properly, and we can't just assume that it's fine just because it's natural.
Exactly. But that goes into then how you dispose of waste in industry and dyeing. So
how do you manage that through your Fibre 52 project?
Well, Fibre 52 is reacted in its entirety. So if I can say, what I do is I have 3 enzymes and another bioproduct, which my learned friends, the lawyers, won't let me tell you about.
Fine.
But that's the catalyst for the other products, for the other bioproducts, which are enzymes. They react with each other and with the hydrogen peroxide, and they're gone. So everything's gone. That's why I've got a clean dye bath. I don't have to wash off because everything's reacted. It's gone. So if I did drop that dye bath, it's not doing any harm. But even if I did drop it, what I would make sure is that it goes into a settling tank. Anything that's bad in there is settled out and taken away as sludge, and then burned. It's that's what's happening these days. Some of it goes into landfill, which is not great. But basically that waste out of, which didn't used to be the case, but, these days, the dyers have to watch what they're doing. There are very strict environmental rules and laws which have to be obeyed.
Like many of you, I'm deeply concerned about the urgency of climate issues and the environmental impact of the textile industry. And as I've thought about this over the last few years, I've realized that there's this huge need for a supportive community that celebrates sustainable practices and shares knowledge and inspires change. So I'm excited to announce the Green Stitchers Hive, and it's a place for textile lovers who share that passion for nature, creativity, and sustainability. There is a range of exciting programs and events going on in the Hive. It's an online space with virtual sewing circles, a curated suppliers directory. There's monthly virtual hive gatherings where we come together and share our projects and our ideas and our insights. There's also tutorials and courses and live events going on. It's an exciting space. If this is something that you're interested in, you can head on over to my website at bridgetoflaherty.com and you can register there. So talk to me a little bit about some of your early days, because you were working at a time when those environmental protections obviously weren't in place. But where you started over in England in Huddersfield, which turns out is really near, like my family grew up in the same area. So that's really cool to find out. Your accent is amazing. Like, I just feel like I'm listening to my uncle talking, because it's a very familiar accent for me. So tell me a little bit about how you started into the textile industry, because that was a common thing in that region, but then how you transitioned into wanting to have more sustainable practices around that. Where did that come for you?
Yeah. Growing up with dye stuffs all around me, even our washing would be blue or red or yellow, whatever was floating around in the air at the time.
Okay.
And as you know, we don't have great weather in England, so you get the dye stuff onto your white sheets, it'd rain, and then they'd spread.
Oh, wow.
And so my mother had to rewash them again. But what happened is the house where I had lived was joined onto a beautiful mill, which was one of the most prestigious worsted weaving mills in the world. So Huddersfield's famous for its fine worsteds, and again, some of the finest in the world, but which harkens back to those nice hills you're talking about, where your relatives live. That's where the sheep were all living, as you've probably seen them.
For sure.
And that's where the industry started about 1,000 years ago.
Wow.
And so it's an old industry. And Huddersfield had woolen and worsted. But the houses that we lived in were really bolted onto the mill. That's a normal thing in England, in that you get a lot of that, especially like the house where I lived was built in, I think, 1890 or something like that, just before the turn of the century. And so I kind of had to be in textiles because I'm born in a textile mill.
Yeah, no kidding. It's in your blood, as it were.
Literally, yeah. So the biggest dye stuff maker in the world was behind my house. And we had two other huge dye stuff making companies in the town as well. So it was very much, and then we had about 100 mills.
Oh, wow.
So 100 textiles, all involved in wool. There was a little bit of cotton, but mainly wool blends. And that said, me as a dyer, I was fortunate enough to be one of the pioneers of dyeing polyester. Polyester was just getting into automotive.
Okay. Yeah.
So people were getting car carpets, would you believe, which was a huge luxury in those days. And then the parcel shells, the roofs, and so on, they all came about. And we had to use very high light fastness dye stuffs. And there was one of the biggest manufacturers in the next town to me, and I would dye enormous quantities for them. But polyester had problems. It had what we call unreacted polyester, which is called an oligomer. Okay. And that was like a glue that you had to get off. Otherwise, you couldn't further process it.
That's not the same as sizing, right? That's a different thing.
Quite a different thing, yeah. So, we can talk about sizing because that's an interesting subject.
We'll jump into that next.
All right. And so we pioneered polyester dyeing, and we pioneered monocrylics. I don't know.
I have heard of monocrylics, yeah.
So they're flame retardants. They came from Japan. Our Japanese friends were very clever in that they sent them to England to dye, in that they were unstable in the first place because there's something called a glass transition temperature in acrylics. So mainly these days, you've got between 80 and 90 degrees. You've got that little point where it can be 1 or 2 degrees where the acrylic decides it's a solid, and then it decides it's not.
Okay.
And that's why it's called glass transition. At that point, it can set solid. And that's what happened with monocrylics. So we actually built our first car park on that because it was harder than a brick. We had to get it out of the machines with hydraulic drills. But that we kept on going, and eventually monocrylics were born, and all those lovely flame retardant fabrics are born. And now monocrylics are still a big fiber in workwear, protective wear, because they do prevent flame damage to ourselves. So they're very good at preventing flames from spreading. Now, if you want to talk about size, that's
well, tell me a little bit more about sizing, because I only know it in the world of quilt cottons.
Right. Yeah. So cotton, when you weave it, you need the size to help the warp and weft.
Okay.
So the warp's on a big, yeah. And then you got the weft, which is going across on a shuttle. As you warping to keep, again, there's no easy answer to this, but it basically you put on starch.
Okay.
To hold the warps in place, to make the whole weaving process more stable. But also these days you get what's called polyvinyl acrylate put on as a size. And if the weaver doesn't tell you which is on there, you've got a bit of a problem, because it's different products to get rid of either. And so you do see a lot of that in commissioned dye houses where, the fabrics will have come from overseas, but they won't really know what's on there. What is the size? So they got to kind of do some little tests if they can, but even then you don't always know. So that's the short answer on sizing.
I just know that I wash my fabric before I'm going to start quilting because I want to get the sizing out.
Yeah, and usually it comes off. Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about one of the comments when I'm doing some research on you. We're talking about ways that enhancing the textile performance qualities, like that's pretty much what your motivation is around Fibre 52, is to make the textiles perform better and do better in terms of sustainability. And I want to have a bit of a conversation around circular economy. Is that something that you can talk to us about? Because it's not something I've really talked about on my podcast. I'm really interested in it and seeing how those connections can happen. And maybe you can explain a little bit to the folks that are listening what we even mean by circular economy, and then how these textiles kind of contribute into that.
Yeah, well, I'm far from an expert, let me tell you that.
Me too.
And, good. The circular economy is
fascinating. It is fascinating.
There's no doubt about it. If I can go back to Fibre 52, and yes, the circular economy was a driver for me in the sustainable bleach process, but also in leaving the cotton more natural, you get performance in that if you're wearing it against your skin, you've got wonderful comfort factor without having to put, as is being done, to make cotton a performance fiber, you have to put fluorocarbons on, or forever chemicals, as they're called. And PTFE and so on is now being phased out. So the circular economy for me is interesting in that in leaving cotton stronger, right, you can, in theory, recycle it more or recycle it into better products. So what happens is I always measure the strength of the cotton when it's dyed. And that's how I realized that we were getting somewhere with Fibre 52 when we made a big difference to the strength of the cotton by not degrading it, particularly in the bleaching process.
Then it has potential to be something else after its first use. Yeah.
Yeah, because some of the big recycling plants here, there's a couple of huge ones in South Carolina. Basically, when they recycle, and that's post-consumer waste. Yeah. So, that's the big guys.
Yeah.
And as you know, I won't name the brand, but there are big stores where they say, bring your worn clothes back and we'll give you 5% off your next purchase. That goes to huge factories, and what they do is they break it down. They break those garments down into what's usually fairly short fibers. Those fibers most of the time can't be respun. So what they do is they go into felts, not
Right.
felts, or well, they do go into felts, but they also go into like
Yeah.
insulation.
That's
For
referred
instance,
to as shoddy fabric, right? Yeah.
shoddy. Yeah, well, that's again harks back to
Yeah.
my town and that, which were called the shoddy and
Yeah.
Mungo
Yeah.
areas. Uh, in fact, that was Dewsbury, the next
Right.
town to me. Uh,
That's where they did the
yeah,
shoddy.
and
Yeah.
Batley. Dewsbury was shoddy and Batley was Mungo. But yeah, so recycling's been around
Yeah.
forever. Uh, so it's quite funny for me to listen to people say, "No, this is recycled. It's a new process." No, it
Right.
isn't. But um, I think people are looking at better ways to recycle because recycling in itself has been a bit of a dirty process.
Absolutely.
And so, what I'm trying to do with Fibre 52 is retain longer fibre so it can be respun. But also, we're going to work with some interesting companies who are being really well funded because what they can do is they can take that clothing, they can take the polyester out and reuse it so it doesn't go into
Yeah.
landfill. Uh, and there's a couple of companies who we've spoken to, they've spoken to us because they like our sustainable story along with their sustainable story, put the two together, and you've got,
Really good product.
a
Yeah.
circular. So it's very circular. And that's, a big motivation for us and something that's going to be very much in our future in that we'd like to put, I'm saying if when we turn a profit, let's be
Of course you're
positive.
going to. So you've gone
When
through
we
your
turn a
early
profit,
research phases. Now you're in your development phases. It's good. It's like every business,
that's
right?
right. We're now in commercialization at last. And so what we're going to do is we're going to reinvest that money. Um, we're not looking to put it in the bank and say, great, we've done
Yeah.
it. We want to move forward, and the circular economy is really in our sights, as is affecting other textiles and doing them produce them in a better way, better manner. That's what we'd
That's
like to do.
awesome. In terms of labeling and certification bodies, is the process that you're doing something that can contribute towards like an OEKO-TEX standard 100 process? Oh, that's
Absolutely,
so
yeah.
good.
We're working we're working on Okotex, ZHDC, zero
Yeah.
discharge, or zero chemical discharge. But what we're doing with an exalted university in where are they? In northern Italy. They're doing our life cycle analysis right
Awesome.
now. So with all the dyers that we work with in Italy, they send their results to this
Okay.
university, and they put our results versus traditional
Amazing.
results. So what I tend to do is to ask that dyer, can we buy, can we buy so much of your fabric, so much of your yarn, and so on, and then send it with ours for the LCA. And quite often, what I'll do is I'll buy
Okay.
cotton and dye with the same dye stuff, but using the old chemistry, and then we can see exactly
What
how
the
much
difference, yeah, and
water
what
we
the
save.
difference is between them in terms of the
So
effluent.
you
Yeah.
Yeah, so we line that up, and we're going for quite a few certifications, which I've probably got another 2 months before that LCA is done. But that's the trigger for a whole raft of certifications.
Yeah.
So we'd like to work if we can. We'd like to work with
Yeah.
GOTS, the global, and people like that, Blue Sign, you name it. It just gives us the opportunity to do that because they've got the base information to
Yeah.
say, okay, we can start and work
Well,
with this now. There's still more
yeah,
to be
and
done.
so I did
Yeah,
an interview with OEKO-TEX recently and got to learn about the process around it. And one of the things that she was saying was just how interlinked the standard is. So when you have that core fabric already certified with the OEKO-TEX standard, and then it's used to make a product, then it's a part of the process, and so it helps offset the costs for one thing for a smaller manufacturer and producer if the material base is already certified under OEKO-TEX. So that's so
absolutely.
great that
Yeah,
you're working towards that and contributing towards that. And GOTS is they're on my list of people and I'm waiting to book them in, and I'm going to be doing a conversation with them as well. And yeah,
Right.
it's pretty exciting. And there's a few other certifications. I'd like to do GRS as well. I'd like to know a little bit more about what they're doing on the global recycling standard. So yeah, it's really interesting to have all these conversations, but knowing that this manufacturing piece and the production piece is also learning about that is just so cool. I can't thank you enough for kind of walking us through all of this. These are things about the dye stuff I didn't know nearly enough about the dye process and about everything that's involved in it. And it's really exciting to me to see these things starting to happen and making the products available for the people like me who are at the other end of purchasing, to know that we're getting products that are safe and healthy and have actually had all this thought put into it. That's important to me. I want to know those things.
Me too. And I think, what you're touching on there is, again, a very important thing is that labeling should be better and traceability
Yeah.
should be better, which is one reason I started Duckworth, my wool company, is that we could shear the sheep in Montana and then almost go with the truck all the way through to the finished.
Yeah, you knew exactly what was happening along every step of the way.
Yeah, we called it sheep to shelf because it was all the way along. And that's pretty much what we're doing with Fibre 52. We're actually going to be working right down with the cotton growers, and linking all the chain through and then monitoring that chain. That's another reason that we're doing an LCA, and that's part of our monitoring process, in that we're going to be able to track everything. Because the other thing is, we don't want counterfeit.
Sure, of course.
So we spend a lot of money on making sure we're really protecting our intellectual property around the world. And one reason I look desperately tired is that we've got.
I didn't notice.
We've got. Well, yeah, I feel it. But what happened is, now we've started dealing in Bangladesh, Pakistan, India, Indonesia, South America, Central America, on different time zones. So you get, really, really early calls and really, really late calls at the other end of the day. But but you got to do it, right? There's you can't duck that, but you don't do it every day of the week, but it's pretty regular. So that in itself is good to see, in that we're protecting that IP wherever we can. Because I've said this before, the great thing about Fibre 52 is you don't need new machinery for it. You can use any existing machinery. So, because there's a lot of sustainable stuff where they go, this is the most sustainable dyeing process in the world. Now give me $10 million and you'll get a machine, which is fine. But, in a lot of areas of textile manufacturing, don't have $10 million.
No, and its bottom line is really, like, that's the driver behind a lot of decisions for manufacturing anyway. And so trying to introduce sustainability, and if it's going to cost people more, we're not going to see a transition from the average production.
No, and this process, Fibre 52, just cannot cost more than the normal process, and we're working through that, because even if our products, the products that we put into the dye bath and the bleach bath, even if they're a little bit more expensive as a bioproduct, with all the savings
around the energy and water production,
we're actually below normal standard processing costs, and so that takes a little bit of getting through, because you can imagine if you've been a dyer for 80 years and you want to use the same process, you're a big guy. I go to some huge dye houses that are still left here in the US, and it's not that they're resistant to sustainability and change. You can understand they've just been through a pandemic,
right?
And now they're trying to catch up. Everybody's 6 weeks behind. Do we need a new process? Maybe not. So that's also a bit of a barrier to us right now. But we're getting. But
once they start hearing the savings, then that's a different story. Then you're starting to talk a language they want to hear. Yeah, it's exciting. You're doing great things. It's really exciting.
Well, nice of you to say so. You too. I wish I was more crafty, and I'm not. And that's probably because I have spent my time working 6 days
We
a
need
week.
all elements. We need all the people doing all the things so that we can have a better world in all different ways. We can't all do all of it. So we have to specialize. And we need all those specialists in the world. Yeah.
Exactly. And, we can all be friends and tell each other about what we do
Exactly.
well.
And
Yeah.
share. So do you have like a public face? Are people able to go and learn more about Fibre 52 and figure that out?
Yeah, we have a
Okay.
website. I'm
You're
the
the
public
public
face,
face.
pretty
All
much.
right.
Well, apart from our company president, Laura Thornquist, who she was a news anchor for
Cool.
many years, so she's really good at
Sure.
presenting. And so quite often Laura helps me out and does some of the presenting. So I guess we're both the
Okay.
face of Fibre 52. But if you go to fibre52.com, you can see more of what Fibre 52 is, and we're adding to that all the time. We don't want to overwhelm everybody with
data,
tons of information. Yeah, but we do want to update it. And as we make breakthroughs, as we get, then we'll put it on the website. And there is I think an info. Yes, there is. There's an info at Fibre 52. So if you want to write in and ask a question, we'll get back to you. Don't know how long it will take, but we do. We do.
Okay, well, I'll put that
that
into the show notes for the podcast as well, so people can access that and look a little bit more and follow what you're doing, because I think it is really great stuff. And knowing that these things are coming, it's exciting stuff to see in our industry. And cotton is such a big part of quilting, and to see that the improvements and changes are happening around some of these processes it's really exciting. Thank you for sharing it with us today.
Well, thank you. Thanks for all your nice questions, challenging questions in many cases. Yes.
No, my pleasure. You know what I really love about this conversation? It's not just that he's working on getting a product out into the world that's a good, sustainable product, but that he's working really hard at the process level. And he and many other people that are out in the industry that I haven't even found yet are doing this kind of work. And it's so important so that our future actually is bright, and that we have choices and opportunities to purchase materials that are free from harmful substances and have the environment in mind. And it's not just about a product itself, but it's about the process. That to me is really exciting, really, really exciting. And I'm looking forward to finding more of that kind of work that's being done out there, because I know there's more of it. I just haven't found it yet. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the conversation. I sure did. If you're interested in a community that engages with sustainability in quilting and textiles, you can join the Learning Hub at BridgetO'Flaherty.com. There you will find memberships, online courses, supplies, and resources for sustainability and my textile art. You can also book me to speak with or teach your group. You can find me on social media at The Sustainable Quilter. Don't forget to comment, like, and share, and to follow me on your favorite podcast app so you won't miss an episode. Thanks for joining me, and I'm so excited to share this journey with you. Until next time, happy stitching.